I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation, the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. Prosecutors allege, and their allegations are very clear, they believe Karen Reed murdered John with her car, her SUV. But what about the defense? What are their allegations? This hour, we lay them all out for you. Here's the story. In the early morning hours of January 29, 2022, Boston police officer John O'Keefe was found dead outside of 34 Fairview Road in Canton, Massachusetts. His girlfriend Karen Reed is accused of second-degree murder, with prosecutors alleging she struck him with her SUV after a night of drinking and left him to die in the snow. However, Karen Reed's defense team presents an alternative narrative, asserting that O'Keefe was beaten inside the home during a party hosted by fellow police officer Brian Albert and then subsequently staged outside to frame Karen Reed. They highlight alleged investigative misconduct, including the use of inappropriate evidence collection methods and potential conflicts of interest due to the close ties between investigators and the Albert family. The defense also questions the integrity of key witness Jennifer McCabe, who admitted to being untruthful with investigators and faced intense cross-examination regarding those inconsistencies. This case has garnered national attention, with debates ongoing over the events of that night and the potential involvement of those present at 34 Fairview Road. Now, as this trial continues, right now the defense is cross-examining witnesses. They haven't presented their own evidence, but part of making a case is through cross-examination. We also know that we watched this trial 1 year ago, so we got a really good idea for what the defense believes happened here. So again, during this program, we're going to show you stuff from last year's trial, stuff from this year's trial, and other images and information that'll help you understand the defense's perspective here. Again, we're laying it out for you, trying to understand what they believe actually happened to John O'Keefe versus what the prosecution has accused her of and is attempting to prove. So one of the exhibits from the trial last year was this video I want to take a look at. And this is from the bulkhead in the backyard, and you have the stairs that go down into the basement, and then from the basement you go out the backyard and you take a few steps in that backyard, and you see that there's a fence. You get to that fence and you open it up, and what's interesting is what is straight in front of you, which you can see the flagpole and the area where John O'Keefe's body was found. So I recall from that first trial, this again, part of the theory, they believe that John O'Keefe's body was placed out there. He didn't die out there, he died in the house. So how do you get him out of the house, and how does he end up by the flagpole? What they're saying is perhaps it was through that bulkhead and those stairs out of the basement. But it still leads a lot of questions unanswered about what happened here. And that brings us to the first question in our investigation tonight. And it's a big one, a really big one. How does the defense say John O'Keefe was killed? Right? This is a huge question. Joining us, Karen Reed supporter Nick Rocco. Also joining us on the phone tonight, Karen Reed supporter, and she is Nurse Kim on YouTube and TikTok. Nurse Kim Whalen is with us as well. Thank you both for being here. Before we start talking, Nick and Kim, I have something I want to show you. Here's a visual representation that we found online of who was in the house from an account a lot of people are watching right now on YouTube called Microdots.
Matt McCabe, Jennifer McCabe, Caitlin Albert, homeowner Brian Albert, and nephew Colin Albert. Brian Albert Jr., his friend Sarah Levinson, homeowner Nicole Albert, friend Julie Nagel, and one Brian Higgins.
All right, so there, the beginning part of the video laying out some of who is in the house. So we've got all these people in the house. Nick, what is the theory here on how they say John O'Keefe ends up dead once he enters 34 Fairview?
Well, I think a point in testimony, during the first trial, you had Brian Higgins. He stated that a man with dark hair walked into that house. So he's putting somebody unidentified and unnamed into that house. We know nobody saw John O'Keefe outside laying on the lawn with a dusting of snow. So it wouldn't surprise me if nobody saw John O'Keefe come into the house. I mean, they're all drinking, they're all partying. So he comes inside the house, he makes his way downstairs somehow, and a fight breaks out. They have weight equipment down there.
I want to take this one step at a time. One step at a time, Nick. So, and your connection is just a little off, so we're not hearing you 100% clear. Maybe it'll clear up here. So you say a fight starts. Where would this fight start? How long after he steps inside that home?
I believe words were exchanged right away.
And where in the home?
So most likely this happened downstairs where nobody would have seen this fight break out. We know Brian Albert and Brian Higgins both had different stories of what upstairs meant. Brian Higgins said he was upstairs, he'd never been on the second floor of the house, and Brian Albert claims that they were upstairs on the second floor of the house. So that would only make me believe they were downstairs in the basement if Brian Higgins has never been on that second floor.
All right, Kim, I want to go to you. From your perspective, there's an immediate confrontation. They end up somehow down in the basement?
Yeah, it could be, Vinny. Again, we're not, as the defense or as a spectator, I'm not a Mass State Police trooper. I did not investigate what happened at 34 Fairview on January 29th,
right.
2020.
But Kim, what I'm trying to clarify here, right, there's a lot of people watching this trial. There's some watching it for the first time, and everyone is hearing that something nefarious happened here, and it seems the defense has a pretty good idea of what they believe happened. Now, what they're permitted to argue is right. Different. That's not what I'm talking. I'm talking about what we've heard in pretrial motions, allegations, courthouse steps, everywhere throughout this case, which has been litigated and talked about for years now. What is it that the defense side believes happened inside that house?
So, in my opinion, it would be that a scuffle, right? Something occurred, and within seconds, Vinny, this wasn't a planned, plotted, assault. But when men, and specifically men of Boston police and ATF, et cetera, get together, on occasion, it can turn physical. And I believe that that's what happened, and very quickly. And then it became a question of what now?
I want to put up on the screen something that it's been shown and talked about a lot, which is the image of John O'Keefe's arm. And it was Alan Jackson, I think, who first showed this during a pretrial hearing inside the courtroom before the first trial. And this is the one piece of evidence that everyone has an opinion on. Kim, you look at that. What does that tell you about what happened to John O'Keefe that night?
Yeah, Vinny, well, I'm a wound certified RN, nationally wound certified, and I can tell you without a question of a doubt that that is not polycarbonate plastic that spontaneously combusted from Karen Reed's Lexus taillight. That is animal-inflicted. What kind? I have to leave that to physicians, but as a registered nurse with a plethora of experience in wound care, that is a wound. That is either, furrows as described by whom? Timothy Nuttall from the Canton Fire Department and paramedics. These are scratches and or, I guess, bite marks from a large animal, either canine or potentially coyote. I don't know.
Now, let's get to what the defense is alleging, and I think we all know where we're going. Let's take a look at the cross-examination of Nicole Albert back in the 2024 trial last year, talking about the dog that the Alberts owned.
So is this a cover-up, and if so, who's leading the cover-up?
Your guess is as good as mine. That's what we're trying to figure out. That's exactly what we're trying to figure out.
Albert, you don't have Chloe anymore, do you?
Nope.
In May of 2022, 4 months after Mr. O'Keefe's death, you got rid of your family dog of 6 years.
Objection.
Oh, is that true? Is that when you got rid of your dog?
I did not get rid of my dog. I rehomed my dog.
Your dog is no longer in the Canton area, correct?
No, but I know where she is. She's in Vermont.
So, Kim, I mean, I've heard it in court. I've heard it outside of court. I've heard it online everywhere. The defense is saying that this dog that was rehomed, Chloe the dog, had something to do with what happened to John O'Keefe that night, right? I mean, this is what they want to argue to this jury.
Well, yes, absolutely, Vinnie. And I think that there is evidence that would show that, i.e. Dr. Russell from the defense, who is very sure and certain in her medical opinion that those injuries to Officer John O'Keefe's right forearm came from a large canine. And a large canine named Chloe, a German Shepherd, lived at 34 Fairview on and about January 29th, 2022.
All right, we've reconnected Nick's audio. Fantastic. Nick, so putting together the pieces now, you've got a physical fight that happens quickly. We've got an attack by the dog inside. How is the defense, what is their belief on how those two things are related to one another?
Well, for anybody who has a dog, they know that when an owner is, even if you're play fighting, the dog jumps in. So if the dog has any fear that there's an actual altercation going on, that dog is going to protect the homeowner and whoever else that dog loves. We also know that Chloe is not good with strangers, hence why Brian Albert had to bring the dog upstairs at one point during the night when everybody was downstairs. One of the questions that I would ask about Chloe the dog is, that morning when Jen McCabe barged in upstairs, Chloe made no noise, made no sound when there were police officers outside, did not approach Officer Lank earlier that morning. Nobody talked about letting Chloe the dog outside to go to the bathroom or feeding the dog that morning. Nobody saw the dog Chloe. So you have to ask, if the dog was there that night, where is the dog the next morning? Why is the dog not at 34 Fairview Road? Why did they rehome a dog after 7 years of owning this pet? You don't just get rid of a dog. And Garrett Wing, one of the defense experts that's going to come in and testify about the dog bites on John Arm, this guy is a world-renowned canine dog trainer. He knows a washed-up police dog from one of the best dogs he's ever trained in the world. This guy is going to convince the jury that those are canine bites and scratches on John O'Keefe's arm, because taillight, which is made out of polycarbonate, does not, it's shatterproof. It's not going to shatter into 47 pieces and create marks on his arm that specifically look like they're from a dog, and then you get rid of the dog. And we know the dog has a violent history because neighbors have been attacked, which are also on the defense's witness list that are going to talk about this.
All right, Nick and Kim are going to stay with us as we continue. Again, this hour, what we're doing is laying out what the defense's allegations are in this case. We know what the prosecution's allegations are. So coming up next, why does the defense say that they did it?
The defendant kissed me.
And how did she kiss you?
Not like a friend.
Was Karen Reed a killer girlfriend?
She's guilty.
Or the scapegoat in an elaborate cover-up?
Karen Reed was framed! You know who did it.
The Karen Reed murder retrial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8/7 Central on Court TV.
Just look at that touch from Trinity Rodman.
Saturday night.
When she is on the field, she changes the game.
Saturday night.
Saturday night is our night.
The new Saturday Night Out is on ION all season long.
Karen Reed was framed. Her car never struck John O'Keefe. She did not cause his death. And that means that somebody else did.
So The defense has said Karen Reed is framed. That was from the 24 trial, but I mean, their theory hasn't changed, that she was framed. She was set up to take the rap for this because they're covering up a murder that was done by someone else. People connected to law enforcement, including Brian Albert Sr., the owner of 34 Fairview. Take a listen to Brian Albert Sr. last year testifying about John O'Keefe and Karen Reed.
John never came into my house that night. He would have been welcomed, and the defendant would have been welcomed with open arms had they come in, and I wish they had. I really do.
Okay, so he wished that they had come in, right? But they're pointing the finger at him, they're pointing the finger at Brian Higgins, and they're pointing the finger at his nephew, Colin Albert, even though they won't be able to do that at this trial. Brings us to the next question in our investigation. Why does the defense say they did it? Why did they do it? What was their motive? What is the defense saying is their motive? Still with us, Nick Rocco and Boston attorney, former prosecutors, followed this case closely. She's Note My Objection on TikTok. Catherine Loftus is with us as well. All right, I want to play one extremely important soundbite for folks who aren't familiar with the story and some of the things that have happened here. Here's Brian Higgins testifying last year.
The defendant kissed me.
And how did she kiss you?
Not like a friend.
Lip to lip, is that fair to say?
Yes.
Like a romantic kiss?
That's the way I interpreted it. I was physically attracted to her, yes.
Sexually attracted to her was my question.
Well, I think in the text I said, you're hot.
Okay. So my question again, Mr. Higgins, you seem to not want to answer my question. My question is, were you or were you not sexually attracted to my client?
Yes.
The real deal was what? What did you mean by I want the real deal?
Like a relationship.
All right, Nick, is the defense alleging here a love triangle? I've covered that trial many, many times here on Court TV, where Brian Higgins likes Karen Reed, she's with John O'Keefe, and then Higgins and O'Keefe get into some sort of a fight. Is that the motivation behind this confrontation and fight that's being alleged by the defense?
Well, the prosecution is the one that's trying to say that is the motive behind why Karen Reed wanted to murder John, right? So they need to have a motive. She was stepping out on John. She was cheating on him with Brian Higgins, and they were going to break up. So that's the Commonwealth's reason why second-degree murder, she did this on purpose. But I personally do not believe that when John went into that house, there was a plan to kill John O'Keefe. I believe that this was a fight that went wrong. Words were exchanged. A fight happened.
Are the
John
words
falls back,
about
hits his
Karen
head.
Reed, though? Is there any allegation that the defense has at any point of this litigation or the discussion of this case for the last several years that the confrontation was because of Karen Reed and Brian Higgins, Karen Reed, John O'Keefe?
Well, yeah, I mean, you could assume that. I would believe that that would be a motive of Brian Higgins to want to beat up John O'Keefe or potentially get into a fight with him because of the fact that, you know, maybe she wasn't leaving John and Brian Higgins thought he had a chance to date Karen Reed. And that's not really a good friend to John O'Keefe, considering the fact that they said they were friends, and yet here he is texting his girlfriend behind his back, wanting to have a serious, real deal relationship with him. And that would be a motive for Brian Higgins to potentially have words. You know, let's say John O'Keefe walks in the house. Oh, where's Karen? Well, why are you asking about Karen? And then a fight breaks out. It's as simple as that. And then the fight goes bad. Again, I don't believe that anybody had intentions to kill John O'Keefe, but I do believe that something happened inside that house.
All right, Catherine, what is this the reason why? Is it Brian Higgins' love triangle? Is it something else? What is the defense trying to allege here?
Well, I think you have to parse it out into the individual third-party culprits. Obviously, we originally had Brian Higgins, Brian Albert, and Colin Albert. As you mentioned, Colin Albert will not be allowed to be mentioned as a potential third-party culprit as a result of the court's ruling. And what the defense has to prove is that any individual had the motive, intent, and opportunity. And so you have to really look at both Brian Albert and Brian Higgins in two different ways. I think that the What the defense wants the jury to look at is, as Mr. Rocco pointed out, the text messages between Brian Higgins and Karen Reed, the sort of flirting back and forth. I think it's a little bit, murkier relative to Brian Albert. There's been discussion about his, history of boxing and fighting, but the question is really, how do we get to the point? How does the defense get to the point where that actually comes into evidence? And as you were discussing, what actually happened? What are the allegations? Why did somebody allegedly do this inside of the house? The difficult part, I think, for the defense is to show to the jury something tangible that they can hold on to. And unfortunately, I think it's unlikely that there will be anybody who testifies that he came in the house, that there was anything specific. So really what it does is, it creates sort of this inferential argument that the defense is making. But what they need to do to really hammer that home is to provide some data or evidence to back up their claims.
How about what Nick was talking about? Because it's really a double-edged motive. Like the motive that prosecutors are alleging could be the same motive that the defense could allege here. So if it's good for one side, it seems like it would be okay for the other?
Well, I mean, as I'm sure you know, you don't have to actually prove motive for any of these charges. But
the jury wants to know why. The jury wants to know why.
That's correct. But in order, legally it's different, because in order to get a third-party culprit instruction, which is ultimately the goal of the defense, which means that at the end of the trial, when the judge instructs the jury, that she in fact specifically instructs them on the fact that they can take into consideration these alternate third parties. The Commonwealth doesn't actually have to prove that. They just have to prove the elements of the charges in which she faces. So, theoretically, motive is always very, very difficult, right? Because
it's difficult.
The jury wants to know.
Hold that thought. We're running out of time here. Nick Rocco, thank you so much. Catherine's going to stick around. Up next, who was involved in this alleged cover-up and conspiracy? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. Prosecutors say Karen Reed ran him over with her SUV, but the defense has their own story and their own theory of what happened to John O'Keefe. Take a listen. Karen Reed's defense team contends that she is the target of a deliberate conspiracy to frame her for the 2022 death of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. They argue that O'Keefe was fatally injured during a confrontation inside the home of fellow police officer Brian Albert, and that his body was subsequently placed outside to implicate Karen Reed. Central to this claim is the alleged misconduct of State Trooper Michael Proctor, the lead investigator, who was later dismissed for unethical behavior and the mishandling of evidence. The defense highlights several investigative irregularities, the use of inappropriate materials like solo cups and a leaf blower for evidence collection, and the omission of key witness statements from initial reports. They also point to inconsistencies in testimony, such as that of Jennifer McCabe, who admitted to being untruthful with investigators. Furthermore, the defense challenges the forensic evidence, noting that the injuries on John O'Keefe's body may not align with being struck by a vehicle. This case is unlike most and has taken on a life of its own, with 12 men and women left to figure it all out. So there was an interesting moment because Karen Reed wasn't originally charged with murder, but then she was rearrested after being indicted for second-degree murder. And when she was brought down to be processed, you can hear her voice in this body cam video. Take a listen to what she says.
And you were indicted by grand jury.
Okay, you're aware he was beaten up by Brian and Colin Albert. I mean, we're all in on the same joke, right? My taillight was cracked and John was pulverized.
Okay, so there she is laying out her allegations and really the defense allegations about what happened to John O'Keefe from the defense perspective. And that's what we're doing this hour. We're just looking at and trying to understand what the defense is alleging. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. And this is a big one. Who was involved in this alleged cover-up and conspiracy, right? There's the conspiracy, there's the actual killing of John O'Keefe, and then there's the cover-up of the killing of John O'Keefe and the framing part of the conspiracy of Karen Reed. Joining me to talk about all this, our guests. Catherine Loftus is with us, who has followed this case very closely, along with Karen Reed supporter Kim Whalen, who is joining us on the phone. Let's take a look at this, because I want to take a look. There's a list of people who are actually in the house, and I want to break down some of the people that are part of this alleged conspiracy. Let's begin by taking a look at who is allegedly in the house. And when you take a look at these folks, you've got Brian Albert, you've got Nicole Albert, you've got Colin Albert, Brian Higgins, Jennifer McCabe, and Matt McCabe. Now, these are the names that we came up with based upon everything that we've seen through cross-examination, the first trial, all of the motions, all the litigation in this case. So, Catherine Loftus, I'll begin with you. 6 people here from inside the house, part of this conspiracy and cover-up. Let's start. Do you believe that the defense believes that all of them? Are there more that are in the house that are potentially involved in this conspiracy alleged by the defense again? Their accusations.
So it's difficult to know specifically who the finger outside of Brian Albert and Brian Higgins is being pointed at. There are additional individuals in the house: Brian Albert Jr., his 2 friends, Sarah Levinson, Julie Nagel. At some point, Caitlin Albert, Brian and Nicole's daughter, and Tristan Thomas pops in and out at different times that evening, early morning. The question really becomes is who is the finger specifically being pointed at, and what can be done to substantiate that? There hasn't been, outside of reference in pretrial litigation, in this trial, in trial number 2, there haven't been specific fingers pointed. So I think that's one of the questions that the jury ultimately will have, is that if we have 10, 11 people inside of the house, and the defense position is that John did go into the house, who specifically saw what happened? Does that mean that all of the people are inside?
Well, I think when you look at this, though, what I find fascinating here is when you look at not just the killing of John O'Keefe, Nurse Kim, but also the cover-up. And you talk about, whether it's butt dials, whether it's getting your story straight. All those folks in the house at a minimum are part of this. Do you believe that there's more?
No, I don't, Vinnie. I think that it is 100%. I believe that the people that you named were specifically involved right by that group text message. And for me, it was jaw-dropping in the cross-examination of Jennifer McCabe to hear that before Karen Reed's indictment, there was a text message thread between Matthew McCabe, between Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, and Jennifer McCabe. And it said, if Karen Reed pleads out, it'll go away, and if not, it will become an episode. And that was brand new for us to hear. And this is, in my opinion, showing that there is a significant situation happening where you're driving by 34 Fairview on January 30th, 2022. You are slowing down your car, and then you're going to Sergeant Lank's house. You're allegedly dropping off another child with Kerry Roberts, coming from Jennifer McCabe's point of view. But why are you slowly driving by? And you admit this openly, that, yeah, we just wanted to see, but we didn't know why. I would believe that one going through such a traumatic experience, yes, you could make a new friend in Kerry Roberts, but this is a very specific circumstance, and protecting family came above all else in this case.
Now, I want to take a look at another list of folks that have been alleged to be part of the cover-up and conspiracy here. You've got Michael Proctor, the trooper, the lead investigator, his partner, Yuri Buchanan. Those two obviously discussed heavily in the first trial. Michael Lank, we just talked about. We just heard Nurse Kim talking about Michael Lank. Ken Berkowitz, who is the former chief of Canton Police, who lives in the neighborhood, and much after this all happened, found a piece of the tail light. That's been questioned. And I think even to some extent, they have questioned the actions of the actual DA of Norfolk County, who's a member of law enforcement. So if you look at all of this, this list, Catherine, do you think this is the strongest part of the defense allegations when it comes to Trooper Proctor and some of the other officers involved, or is this the weakest part of what they're alleging?
I think it's likely the weakest part. I think the strength of the defense's argument when it comes to the police is clearly the substandard investigation. And, you know, from the original responding officers on scene, the collection of the evidence.
So you're saying classic sloppy investigation, but as far as the conspiracy and alleged cover-up, because what we're evaluating here is the defense's theory. And it seems that throughout this case, they have pointed fingers at all these members of law enforcement of doing something wrong for a reason. Do you think they'll get any traction with any of this?
You know, it's hard to know. Ultimately, you know, the jury is the one who's making these evaluations, the credibility determinations of each of the witnesses as they go up. You know, I think the difficulty, Vinny, is that when you have this many people and then you
But
have
I'm not done.
The jury.
I'm not done. I've got more people. I've got more people.
There are more people.
I call this one the others. You've got Kerry Roberts, Allie McCabe, Julie Albert, Chris Albert, and two firefighter paramedics, one who testified recently, Katie McLaughlin and Timothy Nuttall. Let me ask you, Nurse Kim, all of those folks, am I getting any of that wrong in terms of what the defense is alleging, who's involved in this cover-up and conspiracy? It's not all in the direct killing of John O'Keefe, but in changing testimony to help the Alberts, to help the McCabes, all those people involved that we just mentioned?
Well, yes, Vinny, I think that's correct, actually. But at the same time, was it all just in order to fall in line? And once you have your initial reports coming from who? Trooper Michael Proctor, that is saying this is where the direction we are going, and nobody even blinked. I believe that everyone fell in line and that they looked the other way, which is a slogan used by the defense team. But it is so true. And that thin blue line erected into a tall blue wall, and that they just said, we have tunnel vision. This is the only direction we are looking, which is at Karen Reed. And any other evidence that may come up that leads us in another direction, we are not acknowledging. And that's the problem.
Okay, right now we're looking at all of the names that we've gone over in this segment who at some point the defense, through cross-examination, motion practice, direct accusation, has indicated is part of all of their conspiracy cover-up theory. And I think it's about 20 names that we went over. And I mean, this is it. What we're doing this hour, folks, is we're laying it out. We're trying to understand exactly what the defense is alleging here. Good news, our guests are staying with us. Still to come. When did they decide to blame Karen Reed?
It's been my passion to work in nursing homes.
I found 911. One of our residents passed away.
On the next Interview with a Killer.
You watched and stood by while your patient was lying there being tortured.
What else was I supposed to do?
That's so conniving. You understand that? So much for your career in caretaking.
Interview with a Killer, season finale, Sunday at 8 on Court TV.
We are here today because John O'Keefe was killed by the actions and conduct of that defendant, Karen Reed.
Once again, what we're doing is taking a look at the defense theory of the case, because they have their own theory separate from the prosecution. We know what the prosecution is alleging, that Karen Reed ran him over with her SUV and killed John O'Keefe, left him to die in the cold. I want you to take a listen to Jennifer McCabe's testimony, because I think this makes an important point in the case.
When she got on the phone, I had told her, Karen, I saw you guys outside of my sister's house. And then she told me she didn't remember being there. And then she went on to say, she started saying, could I have hit him? Did I hit him? I don't. And then she just was just all over the place, like screaming my name, screaming so many different things. She was hard to follow or understand.
Okay, so this is important because the testimony of Jennifer McCabe is from that morning that Karen Reed is saying all of these things. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. Because again, we're evaluating this conspiracy. When did they, those putting together this conspiracy, decide to blame Karen Reed? When did they all decide she's going to be the fall person for the death of John O'Keefe? Let's unpack more of this with Catherine Loftus. And on the phone is Nurse Kim Whalen. Let me ask you, Kim, was it that morning that the folks involved in this conspiracy, according to the defense, that's when they decided we're going to blame Karen Reed for this?
Yes, it is, actually. Unfortunately, Vinnie, it was, because we know that Officer John O'Keefe was pronounced at Good Samaritan Hospital at 7:50 a.m. Karen is subsequently at Good Samaritan herself for a Section 12, which is a psychiatric evaluation that is, you know, in Massachusetts, how we have to evaluate someone if they are a risk to themselves or others after a statement that was made. And Karen, as soon as she leaves the hospital, she goes back to to One Meadows, to Officer John O'Keefe's home, and she is trying to be there to console his niece and nephew. She doesn't feel comfortable at the home. She subsequently leaves with her items and is never to be respected or contacted again by anybody in the O'Keefe family. And she is looked at as a suspect, per the words of Paul O'Keefe, post-trial 1. At 1.0, when he had a sit-down with Christina Rex, he stated that they wanted to go out and look at her taillight that very morning. This is before Mass State Police had found one piece of taillight, before there was ever an allegation of Karen Reed striking Officer John O'Keefe with her vehicle in reverse that fateful morning.
Now, there was another thing that was a big part of the first trial, and the defense talking about the so-called butt dial. Take a listen.
Who did you call?
I inadvertently called Brian Higgins.
What time?
I don't recall the exact time. After 2.
2:22 and 35 seconds. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Did you speak to Brian Higgins at any point between 1:45 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. that night?
No.
You say you inadvertently called him at 2:22 in the morning.
Yes.
How did you inadvertently call him?
Well, I don't know, because it was inadvertent.
Sort of have to explain that.
Well, it's kind of like a butt dial.
All right, Catherine Loftus, what are your thoughts about, again, it's a cover-up, it's a conspiracy. They're blaming Karen Reed At some point, they've got to decide Karen Reed is going to be the fall person for all of this. What are your thoughts about what the defense is saying here? Are they saying that this thing is hatched the night before or is hatched in the morning, that somehow there's an agreement that Karen Reed will be the fall person for all of this?
Well, I think what they're trying to get the jury to really consider is what was happening in the middle of the night. As you mentioned, you know, these butt dials, Jen McCabe testified about them. I expect we'll hear that from other witnesses, you know, in the, you know, alleged Google search. And then Jen McCabe gets a call at 5 o'clock in the morning. I think in order for it to really flow in the way in which they want, there has to be sort of some idea of a discussion at some point along, you know, until Karen Reed actually calls Jen McCabe, because, you know, the line of questioning, they're asking Kerry Roberts and Jen McCabe herself about, you know, really kind of planting this idea of maybe Karen hit him. Oh, she told me to Google this. So from my perspective, I think they're trying to explain to the jury that there was at least some sort of, you know, idea about who to pin this on that early in the morning. The question really then becomes is, you know, can we really determine who had those conversations? Like, was it the butt dials, the back and forth? And whether the jury will be convinced of that is really, time will tell.
So, Kim, let me ask you, is it the fact that Karen Reed is saying something about, could I have hit him? Or is that part of the plan to plant those words in her mouth? What is the defense alleging here? That's what I'm trying to understand, and I want the viewers to understand. Is it that Karen Reed is saying these words, or these words were never spoken, and it's part of the plan to plant those words into Karen Reed's mouth?
Well, I think that it is that Karen initially went to the fact that, Vinnie, she was the one who dropped Officer John O'Keefe off. And I think that many women and men, I assume, would have a feeling of, oh my gosh, am I responsible for this? Did I do something when I know that I was the last, if I had not dropped him off at this party, would he still be alive? Right? So that, I believe, was the crux of the question that was asked that morning, not a statement. And I never believed that that statement was made.
Well, I want to say a big thank you to Kim Whalen. I know you're in your car, there's a blackout, and you're still helping us out tonight. We really appreciate that. Nurse Kim on YouTube and TikTok. And Catherine Loftus, I know how busy you are because I see you all over the internet. You're on TV shows all over the place. So thank you so much for helping us out and your great insight as well. Now, the defense has been severely restricted so far in what they can say to the jury and in what information they've been able to subpoena in this case as well. That was fought pre-trial. As a result, it's much more difficult for them to prove their allegations. But they don't have to. It's prosecutors, and only prosecutors, who have that burden of proof. The question is, will the defense case make it impossible for prosecutors to meet their burden? I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.